The morning mist hung heavy over the Busan perimeter as Corporal Kim Ho crouched behind a damaged wall. The sound of distant artillery echoed across the hills. It was September 1950, and the North Korean forces were pushing hard against the last defensive line in South Korea. Kim Ho wiped sweat from his forehead and checked his rifle. His unit had been holding this position for 3 days with little sleep and even less food. The enemy was getting closer, and everyone knew it. "Ho, get over here!" shouted Sergeant Park from across the rubble-filled street. "We need to check that crater from last night's bombing." Kim Ho ran low across the broken ground. The crater was deep and still smoking from the explosion. But something was wrong. The hole was too clean, too round. Regular bombs did not make craters like this. "What do you think, Corporal?" asked Private Lee, a young soldier who had joined them only a week ago. Kim Ho jumped down into the crater. At the bottom he found pieces of metal that looked nothing like bomb fragments. The metal was silver and seemed to glow with a soft light. It was warm to the touch, even though the morning air was cold. "This is not from our bombs," Kim Ho said, picking up a piece. "And it is not from theirs either." He put several fragments in his pack and climbed out of the crater. The strange metal felt lighter than it should have been. When he touched it, his wounded hand from yesterday's fighting stopped hurting. 2 hours later, Kim Ho arrived at the field hospital. The tent was full of wounded soldiers lying on stretchers. Nurse Park Soo was moving between the patients, checking bandages and giving medicine. "Ho, what brings you here?" she asked, not looking up from a soldier with a leg wound. "Found something strange," he said, showing her the metal pieces, near the new crater on Hill 203. Park Soo took one of the fragments and examined it. The metal was unlike anything she had seen. It felt warm and seemed to pulse with its own light. "Help me move this patient," she said, pointing to a soldier with a deep cut on his arm. As they lifted him, the metal fragment in her pocket came close to his wound. Something amazing happened. The bleeding stopped. The cut began to close by itself. The soldier's face, which had been pale with pain, returned to normal color. "What just happened?" Park Soo whispered. She took out the metal fragment and held it near another wounded soldier. Again, the healing was faster than normal. Cuts closed quicker, fever went down, pain seemed to disappear. "This is impossible," she said. But she could not deny what she was seeing. Meanwhile, at the communication post, radio operator Lee Jin was having his own strange experience. He had been trying to contact headquarters when his radio picked up signals that should not have been there. The sounds were not like any military radio he knew. They were musical, almost like singing, but they carried information. Lee Jin had always been good with radio equipment, and somehow he understood that these signals were warnings. The first signal came at 0800 hours. It seemed to say that enemy forces would attack from the east in 2 hours. Lee Jin reported this to his commander, who did not believe him but moved some troops east anyway. At exactly 1000 hours, the North Korean attack came from the east, just as the signal had predicted. The second signal came at 1300 hours. This time it warned of artillery fire from the north. Again Lee Jin reported it. Again his commander was doubtful but took precautions. The artillery attack came exactly as predicted. "How are you knowing this?" asked his commander, Major Choi. "I do not know, sir," Lee Jin replied honestly. "The signals just come to my radio. They are not from our forces or the enemy. They are something else." That evening, Kim Ho met with Park Soo and Lee Jin at the medical tent. They shared their strange discoveries. "The metal pieces help healing," Park Soo explained, showing them how quickly a small cut on her finger closed when she held the fragment near it. "And the radio signals predict enemy movements," Lee Jin added. "They have been correct all day." Kim Ho looked at the metal fragments in his hand. They were still warm, still glowing softly. What if these things are connected? What if they come from the same place? "But where?" asked Park Soo. "Maybe not where," said Lee Jin quietly. "Maybe who?" They all looked at each other. The war had been full of strange things, but this was different. This was something that did not belong to their world. As night fell over the Busan perimeter, the 3 soldiers sat in the medical tent, holding pieces of metal that healed wounds and listening to radio signals that saved lives. They did not know it yet. But they had just made first contact with something from beyond the stars. The war around them continued, but their war was about to become much bigger. Major Choi Min stood in his command tent, staring at the reports from the previous day. 3 separate incidents of unexplained phenomena, all happening within a few hours of each other. The healing metal, the predictive radio signals, and now 2 more strange craters found by patrol units. "Sir, you wanted to see me?" Private Yoon. Da entered the tent and saluted. He was young, maybe 20 years old, with thick glasses and careful hands. Before the war, he had been studying engineering at Seoul National University. "Yes, Private. I need someone with a good brain to look at something." Major Choi handed him the metal fragments that Kim Ho had brought. "What do you make of these?" Yun. Da examined the pieces carefully. He held them up to the light, felt their weight, and noticed how they seemed to generate their own warmth. "Sir, this is not any metal I have studied. The structure is too perfect, too clean. Human manufacturing cannot make something like this." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this was not made by humans, sir. Not by us, not by the North Koreans, not by the Chinese or Americans." Yoonda's voice was quiet but certain. "This comes from somewhere else." Major Choi nodded slowly. He had been thinking the same thing but had not wanted to admit it. "There is more. Radio operator Lee has been receiving signals that predict enemy movements. They have been correct every time." "May I hear these signals, sir?" They walked to the communication post where Lee Jin was monitoring the radio. When Major Choi explained what they needed, Lee Jin tuned his equipment to the strange frequency. The sounds that came through were unlike anything Yoon Da had ever heard. They were musical, but also contained patterns, like a code. He listened, for several minutes making notes on paper. "So this is definitely a language. Very complex, but there are mathematical patterns. If I had more time, I think I could understand some of it." "How much time do you need?" "Maybe 2 days to understand basic meanings, a week to decode more complex messages." Major Choi thought about this. The war was moving fast. Chinese forces were crossing the border to help North Korea. Soon the fighting would get much worse. If these signals could help save lives, they needed to understand them quickly. "Private, you have 2 days. Make it your only job." At the same time, Sergeant Nam Gil was leading a patrol to investigate the new crater sites. Nam Gil was an experienced soldier, 35 years old, who had fought in World War II. He knew the difference between normal battle damage and something unusual. The first crater was similar to the one Kim Ho had found, round clean with strange metal pieces scattered around. But this one was larger, and some of the metal pieces were still connected together, forming parts of what looked like a machine. "Sergeant, look at this," called Private Kim, one of his patrol members. He was pointing at something half buried in the crater wall. Nam Gil climbed down and saw what looked like a control panel. It was covered with symbols that were definitely not human writing. Some of the symbols were glowing with the same soft light as the metal fragments. "Nobody touch anything," Nam Gil ordered. "We mark this position and report back." The second crater was even more interesting. This one contained what was clearly part of a vehicle or aircraft, but unlike any design from Earth. The metal was formed in curves that seemed impossible to make. There were no visible joints or welds. It was as if the entire piece had been grown rather than built. As Nam Gil's team was examining the wreckage, his radio crackled to life. "Nam Gil, this is Major Choi. We have reports of Chinese forces moving south faster than expected. They will reach your area in 6 hours. You need to secure anything important and get back here." Nam Gil looked at the strange wreckage around him. If the Chinese forces found this, they would take it for themselves. South Korea would lose the chance to understand what it was. "Men, we are taking everything we can carry. Use the truck. Use pure packs. Use anything. This equipment might help us win the war." The soldiers worked quickly, loading pieces of the strange technology onto their truck. Some pieces were too large to move, so Nam Gil made the difficult decision to destroy them rather than let the enemy have them. As they drove back toward the Pusan perimeter, Nam Gil radioed Major Choi. "Sir, we have recovered significant materials, but there are at least 3 more crash sites that we could not reach. The Chinese will probably find them." "Understood, Sergeant. Get back here safely." That evening, Major Choi gathered his team in his tent. Kim Ho brought his healing metal. Park Soo reported on how the fragments had helped save 12 soldiers that day. Lee Jin had recorded hours of the mysterious signals. Yoon Da had filled pages with mathematical calculations. Nam Gil had brought truck full of alien technology. What we have discovered, Major Choi said quietly, is that we are not alone in the universe. These beings, whoever they are, have been watching our war. Their technology is far beyond ours. But why are they here? Asked Park Soo-yoon Da, looked up from his notes. Sir, I think I'm beginning to understand some of the signals. If I am correct, they were not trying to interfere with our war. They were studying it, learning how humans fight. Learning for what purpose? I do not know yet, sir, but I think we are about to find out. Captain Oh Seok arrived at the field command post just as the sun was setting behind the hills. He had been called back from the front lines for an emergency, briefing that Major Choi described as beyond classified. When he entered the tent and saw the strange glowing metal pieces arranged on the table, he understood why. Captain, what I'm about to show you will change everything you think you know about this war, Major Choi said seriously. Private Yoon, show him what you discovered. Yoon Da had been working day and night on the alien signals. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, but his voice was excited. Sir, I have decoded enough of their language to understand basic communication. And Captain, they are trying to talk to us. Who is trying to talk to us? The beings who own this technology. They have been sending messages asking if we can understand them. I sent back a simple mathematical response this morning. They answered immediately. Oh Seok looked at the radio equipment that Lee Jin had modified with pieces of alien technology. What did they say? They want to meet, face to face, tonight. 2 hours later, Oh Seok stood in a small clearing half a mile from the base, along with Dr. Kang Mi, who had been studying the medical properties of the alien metal. Private Bai Won was with them as a translator, since he had helped Yoon Da learn the alien communication patterns. The clearing was lit by the soft glow of several alien metal pieces arranged in a circle. At exactly midnight, the air in the center of the circle began to shimmer like heat waves on a summer day. A figure appeared. It was tall, about 7 feet, with long arms and a large head. Its skin was pale blue-gray, and its eyes were bigger than human eyes. It wore a simple robe that seemed to be made of the same glowing metal as the fragments. Do not be afraid, the being said, speaking in Korean with a voice that sounded like wind chimes. I am Keth. I am the last survivor of my scout ship. Captain Oh Seok stepped forward, trying to hide his amazement. I am Captain Oh Seok of the Republic of Korea Army. Why are you here? We are refugees, Keth replied sadly. My people are called the Veltar. For 300 of your years, we have been running from an enemy that destroys entire worlds. We came to your solar system to hide and to study. Dr. Kang Mi, who had been watching the alien carefully, spoke up. Study what? You humans. Your species fights in ways we have never seen. You continue fighting even when victory seems impossible. You sacrifice yourselves for others you barely know. We wanted to understand this. Private Bai Won, who had been quiet until now, asked, Why did you crash here? Were you shot down? Keth made a sound that might have been laughter. No, young soldier. We crashed because we were watching your battle so closely that we forgot to watch our own instruments. Your courage distracted us from flying safely. Captain Oh Seok realized this was the most important conversation in human history. What do you want from us? We want to offer you a choice, Keth said. Our enemy, the Zakmor, will find this world eventually. When they do, they will see that humans are natural warriors. They will either try to destroy you or force you to fight in their armies. Dr. Kang Mi felt her heart racing. What kind of choice? We can teach you our technology, our medicine, our weapons, our star travel. In return, you help us fight the Zakmor when they come. Together, we might win a war that has lasted centuries, and if we refuse, asked Oh Seok, then we leave, and you face the Zakmor alone when they arrive. They will come anyway. Your radio and television signals have been traveling through space for decades. They know you exist. Private Bai Won looked at the healing metal pieces glowing around them. Sir, may I ask Keth something? Oh Seok nodded. Keth, why did you choose to contact us? There are bigger armies in this war. The Americans have more weapons. The Chinese have more soldiers. Keth looked directly at Bei Wan with his large, dark eyes. Because yesterday, I watched 3 Korean soldiers share their last piece of food with a wounded enemy prisoner. I watched a nurse work for 18 hours straight to save soldiers from both sides of your war. I watched a radio operator risk his life to warn civilians about incoming artillery. The alien paused, and when he continued, his voice was filled with something that sounded like wonder. In all my travels across the galaxy, I have never seen a species that shows such kindness in the middle of such violence. The Zakmor are powerful, but they do not understand sacrifice or mercy. You do. That makes you more dangerous to them than any weapon. Dr. Kang Mi stepped closer to Keth. If we agree to this alliance, how many lives could your medical technology save? With our healing methods, injuries that now kill in days would heal in hours. Diseases that destroy organs could be cured completely. Your people could live twice as long and be much healthier. Captain Osiok thought about the war raging around them. Thousands of soldiers were dying every day. Thousands more would die tomorrow. But now there was a chance to save them all and maybe save the entire human race from something much worse. Keth, I cannot make this decision alone. I need to talk to my commanders. I understand, Captain. But decide quickly. My instruments detect Zakmor scouts at the edge of your solar system. You have perhaps one of your years before they arrive in force. As Keth faded away like morning mist, the 3 humans stood in the clearing, knowing that everything had just changed forever. Colonel Park Do sat in his headquarters bunker, staring at the alien weapon that lay on his desk. It looked like a simple metal rod, no bigger than a flashlight, but Keth had demonstrated its power the night before. One beam from this device could destroy an entire tank. A dozen of them could end the Korean War in a single day. Sir, the Chinese have crossed the Yalu River with 200,000 troops, reported his aide. Our forces are badly outnumbered. We might have to retreat further south. Park Do picked up the alien weapon. It felt warm in his hands, almost alive. With weapons like this, Korean and UN forces could push the enemy all the way back to China. They could win the war completely. But at what cost? Get me Lieutenant Han Sol and Medic Young Ho, he ordered. 20 minutes later, the 2 men stood before his desk. Lieutenant Han Sol was young but had already proven himself a brave leader. Medic Young Ho was older, a man who had saved hundreds of lives during the fighting. Gentlemen, I need your opinions on something that will affect, not just this war but the future of humanity. Park Do explained about the alien alliance, the approaching enemy from space and the choice they faced. Lieutenant Han Sol listened carefully, then shook his head. Sir, with respect, I think this is wrong. If we use alien weapons to win our war, are we really winning? Or are we just proving that we cannot solve our own problems? The war will end, Park Do replied. Thousands of lives will be saved. But what happens after? Do we become dependent on alien technology? Do we forget how to be human? Han Sol's voice was passionate. Sir, my grandfather fought the Japanese with nothing but courage and determination. My father fought in World War II with basic weapons against superior enemies. Should I win my war with alien magic? Medic Young Ho had been quiet, but now he spoke. Lieutenant, I understand your feelings, but I have watched too many good men die from wounds that alien medicine could heal instantly. If we can save lives, is it not our duty to do so? Even if it means we become junior partners in someone else's galactic war? Han Sol asked. Before anyone could answer, an explosion shook the bunker. Dirt fell from the ceiling and the lights flickered. Sir! A messenger ran into the room. Chinese artillery is hitting our medical stations. We have many wounded and the hospital tent is damaged. The 3 men ran outside. The field hospital was partially destroyed and wounded soldiers were lying in the mud. But something else was there too. Among the injured humans was a small figure with pale blue skin and large eyes. It was a young Veltar, probably a child. What is that doing here? Han Sol asked, pointing at the alien child. Young Ho was already moving toward the wounded. It does not matter what it is. It is hurt, and I am a medic. The alien child was badly injured. One of its arms was twisted at an impossible angle, and blue blood was flowing from cuts on its face. It was making small crying sounds that somehow sounded exactly like a human child in pain. Jung-ho knelt beside the young alien and began treating its wounds with human medical supplies. The child looked up at him with fear in its large eyes. "Is okay," Jung-ho said softly, the same way he spoke to wounded Korean soldiers. "I am going to help you." As he worked, other soldiers gathered around. Some looked curious, others suspicious. Lieutenant Han Sol watched with a complicated expression on his face. "Why are you helping it?" asked one of the soldiers. "It is not human." Jung-ho continued bandaging the alien child's wounds. "Because it is hurt and afraid. That is enough." The child stopped crying and looked up at Jung-ho with something like trust. It reached out with its good arm and touched the medic's hand. When it did, Jung-ho felt a warm sensation, and suddenly he could understand what the child was thinking. The young alien was not a warrior or a spy. It was just a child who had gotten separated from its family during the confusion of the crash. It had been hiding in the hills for days, scared and alone. When the artillery struck, it had been hurt by falling rocks. "Its name is Vel," Jung-ho said quietly. "It is just a child. It has been alone and frightened." Colonel Park-do watched as his medic continued treating the alien child with the same care he showed human patients. Other soldiers began offering water and food. Even Lieutenant Han Sol stepped forward to help. "Sir," Han Sol said quietly to Colonel Park-do, "I think I understand now why Keth chose us." "What do you mean?" "Look around, we are in the middle of a war, we are outnumbered and losing. But when we see someone who needs help, we help them. It does not matter if they are Korean or American or Chinese or alien. We help because it is right." Jung-ho had finished treating the alien child's injuries. The young Veltar was sitting up now, looking much better. It said something in its musical language. "It says thank you," Jung-ho translated, somehow understanding the words. "And it says its people were right about humans." Colonel Park-do looked at the alien weapon in his hand, then at the scene around him. Korean soldiers sharing their rations with an alien child. A medic treating wounds without caring about species. A lieutenant learning compassion even in disagreement. Han Sol, you asked if we should win our war with alien technology. But I think the real question is different. The question is whether we can win the larger war while staying human. What do you mean, sir? I mean that maybe our strength is not in alien weapons. Maybe our strength is in moments like this, when we choose to help instead of harm, even when it costs us something. Park-do made his decision. The Korean War would continue to be fought by humans, with human weapons and human courage. But when the alien enemy arrived, they would face not just human technology but human heart. And that, he realized, might be the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. General Lee Tae stood on the observation deck of the Earth Defense Station, watching as ships from 12 different worlds approached through space. It was 1973, 23 years since the first contact during the Korean War, and today Earth would officially join the Galactic Alliance. The station orbited high above Earth, built with a combination of human engineering and Veltar technology. Through the large windows, Lee Tae could see the blue and white marble of his home planet spinning slowly below. "General, the ceremony will begin in 1 hour," announced his aide, a young officer who had been born after the war ended. Lee Tae nodded. He had been chosen to represent Earth's military in this historic moment, but his mind kept going back to those desperate days at the Pusan perimeter. Who could have imagined that a war fought with rifles and artillery would lead to humanity, joining the stars? In the diplomatic section of the station, Ambassador Seo Na was preparing for her speech to the Galactic Council. She had been selected not just for her intelligence, but because she understood something that many alien species found difficult to grasp: the human concept of fighting for others rather than for conquest. Seo Na reviewed her notes one final time. The other species in the Alliance were logical, practical beings. They fought when necessary and made peace when profitable. But humans had shown them something different during the long war against the Zakmor. The Zakmor invasion had come exactly as Keth predicted, 1 year after first contact. They arrived with massive warships and superior technology, expecting to find a primitive world they could easily conquer. Instead, they found humans who refused to surrender, even when defeat seemed Certain, the war lasted 15 years. Earth's cities were bombed, its armies defeated again and again. But each time the Zakmor thought they had won, humans found new ways to resist. Korean veterans who had survived the Pusan perimeter taught guerrilla tactics to resistance fighters worldwide. The courage they had shown in their small peninsular war became a model for planetary defense. Ambassador, her assistant called, the Veltar delegation wishes to speak with you before the ceremony. Keth entered her office, now older, but still tall and graceful. With him was Vel, the alien child that Medic Jung-ho had saved all those years ago. Vel was now an adult and served as a translator between species. Ambassador Seo-na, Keth said with a slight bow, my people wanted to thank you personally before today's ceremony. Without human courage, we would still be running from the Zakmor. We all fought together, Seo-na replied. That is what allies do. Yes, but you fought differently than anyone expected. When the Zakmor captured your cities, you shared food with our refugees. When they destroyed your hospitals, you built new ones for wounded enemies. This confused the Zakmor greatly. Vel stepped forward. Ambassador, I was there when it started. I saw Medic Jung-ho treat my wounds without asking what species I was. That moment changed how my people see humans forever. Meanwhile, in a small house in Seoul, 70-year-old Kim Ho sat with his 8-year-old grandson, Min Soo. The boy was looking at old photographs from the war, trying to understand how his grandfather had been part of something so important. Grandfather, tell me again about the glowing metal, Min, Soo asked, pointing at a faded picture of Kim Ho holding alien fragments. Kim Ho smiled and sat back in his chair. Outside the window, he could see one of the Veltar cultural centers that had been built in major cities around the world. His grandson would grow up knowing aliens as friends and neighbors, something Kim Ho could never have imagined during the HFY War. Well, little one, it was not really about the metal. The metal was just the beginning. Kim Ho's voice was gentle but strong. The important thing was what happened after. What happened? We learned that being brave is not about having the best weapons. It is about doing the right thing even when you are scared. When the big war came from space, we could have hidden. We could have surrendered. But we remembered what we learned in Korea. Min Soo looked confused. What did you learn in Korea? We learned that sometimes you have to fight, not because you can win, but because fighting is right. We learned that helping others, even enemies, makes you stronger than any weapon. And we learned that small countries can do big things when they have big hearts. Kim Ho pointed to a photo of himself with other veterans at a ceremony 5 years earlier. You see, the aliens had been running from their enemies for hundreds of years. They had better ships, better weapons, better technology. But they had forgotten how to hope. How did you teach them to hope, grandfather? By showing them that humans never give up. During the Space War, when the alien enemies destroyed our armies, we built new ones. When they bombed our cities, we rebuilt them. When they captured our leaders, new leaders stepped forward. We kept fighting not because we thought we could win, but because we thought fighting was right. The old veteran looked out the window at the peaceful city. The funny thing is, once we taught the galaxy how to hope again, the war became winnable. The Zakmor were used to enemies who surrendered when things got hard. They did not know what to do with humans who got stronger when things got harder. Min Soo considered this seriously. So we won the big war? We all won together. But yes, little one. And now humans are known throughout the galaxy not as the species with the best weapons, but as the species with the biggest hearts. Korean soldiers started that reputation in 1950, and now it belongs to all of humanity. As the sun set over Seoul, 3 generations of human courage looked toward the stars, where their descendants would carry the same spirit of sacrifice and hope to worlds they had never imagined.